All right, so after reading this article and reading chapter 4, I found that Eric Mastel used a combination of a couple different approaches. Ones from back in the past, ones that are more modern, sort of a big, as he even described it in the article, a melting pot of a lot of different approaches to management. So we'll go ahead and go through the article here. So what I noticed in this first sort of section, when they're sort of introducing him, and they're talking about people that have worked with him, there was one thing that really struck me as part of a specific theory. Let's see. It's where he says, yes, he understands that everyone, including himself, has a job that must be done. He understands the importance of everyone's positions, and he gives us ample space and opportunity to succeed without pressure or intimidation. So this very much struck me as a theory Y kind of approach to management. Because obviously when we're talking about theory X, that's all about intimidation, coercion, all that stuff, fear, basically, to make your employees work. Whereas theory Y is kind of the complete opposite of that. It's really about still making the rules, making the final decisions as a supervisor, but also giving your employees space to have their own sense of responsibility and to kind of grow as their own people. And the manager is also sort of in that, doing the dirty work with them at the same time. So leading by example, really, rather than with fear. So that's what really struck me in that section. So in this next section, where they ask him, how have you been able to achieve the success you have so far in radio? He talks about this analogy about having the right people on a bus in order for them to be successful, to get to where they're going. And again, this is very theory Y, about matching individual talents with, the proper position, having the right people on the bus to do their, correct jobs. And this is also very much from the classical school of management, if we're talking about scientific management, and the careful selection of people for specific positions. That's very relevant in his approach for this section. So in the next, he talks about people who've mentored him, and it was obvious that he's been very influenced by managers who cared for their employees and really were involved with them, not in a kind of helicopter way, but just in a more social, interpersonal sort of way. And this is very modern as well. He talks about people having specific, goals in mind and sharing that with their employees, and this is very modern, with objectives and things like that when you're managing and sharing those objectives with your employees. And so in this section, they ask him, what do you expect from the people you manage? And there's a lot of stuff kind of littered through here. So the first section, he says, he wants people to get involved. He cares and he wants to meet people's needs, but at the same time, he has high expectations for them. And that in and of itself is very caring. He believes in them enough to hold them to a high standard and to allow them to rise to that occasion, to that potential. So this is very much, especially when he talks about the generation of ideas and being willing to collaborate, coworkers with coworkers, workers with managers. This is very much, talking about the social aspect of management and just the work environment. He really believes in teamwork. And as I said, he encourages it between coworkers as well as between himself and his employees. He also, when they're talking about the generation of ideas, he talks a lot about, basically encouraging free thought. He's doesn't really come from a place as a manager of what I say goes, and I don't care about your opinions. What I want to do is correct all the time, and this is how it's going to be. He really encourages people to share their own ideas, be involved, and put their own mark kind of on the organization and be involved as much as they can be. He also encourages leadership. He himself tries to be a leader, as I said before, lead by example, and he also encourages his employees to as I said before, rise to the occasion and be an example for each other. Kind of keep everyone always trying to become better and better. Keep them on their toes. Never let them kind of be complacent and content where they are. Always encouraging them to achieve more and to be better. So I found a bit of strategic management in this part where he talks about staying current, especially in media. That's obviously incredibly important as it's constantly changing. He, wants to know what his competition is doing, so his company can stay at the top of the game. So he wants people to be aware of what's happening, read the news, as he says, and just sort of have an idea of what's happening in the market and with competition. So that's very strategic. All right, so in this section, they ask him, when do you know you have a great employee who has the potential to become a manager? And in this section, there was a lot of kind of allusions to Herzberg's motivators and obviously the Maslow hierarchy of needs. He talks about, an employee already doing the role of a manager or of someone in a higher position. That really proves to him that someone is a good employee because they are already motivated, they're self-motivated to begin with, and they are really, determined. They're trying to take responsibility and they're motivated to, grow and develop as a person. So that's definitely really, it really ties back into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the fact that, and it definitely is a more behavioral kind of form of management, that you're aware that, your employees really do care, the good ones at least really do, and they're going to want to, prove themselves, and that's something that should be encouraged because as humans, that's what we do. He also talks about emotional intelligence, which is something we've talked about a great deal, and this definitely, again, kind of ties back into the social needs of people, employees. That's definitely something that he's aware of, I think, and he knows that a good employee is going to be someone who is very emotionally intelligent. They, connect with not only their coworkers, but they also, connect with their supervisors, and they also don't complain. I really like that part. This again ties into the sort of self-motivated, taking responsibility, all that stuff, all the qualities of a good employee that Eric Mastel sees. Someone who just does their job and does it well, doesn't complain, and really tries to, go the extra mile. And so in the rest of this, when he's talking about his biggest and most proud moment, he really talks about how his employees came together in the midst of adversity and turned their sinking ship around. And I think this is definitely very modern. If we're talking about effectiveness and the fact that success is not always a given, just because you meet your employees' needs and do everything that they require, a high wage, this and that and the other, or just because you set rules and are very strict and have everyone in the exact perfect position and everything is very scientifically kind of put together. Everything is plugged into each part of the equation just as it should be. I think Eric realizes that we are human, and it really there has to be some kind of balance between those two things. You can't forget that effectiveness only really comes from human error. He really talks about, almost encourages failure, and as that's the only way to success, really, because how can you know what success is if you don't fail first? And so he really is aware, I think, of the human psyche. So that's very behavioral, but at the same time, he knows that there needs to be good communication. Coworkers need to be working together. Management needs to be working with everyone, and they all come together, pull together their strengths and their talents in their specific places. That's the scientific part. And it comes together to create effectiveness or success. And so that aspect of, his approach to management was very modern, that he kind of could see the collision of those two and how they need to come together in order to have not a perfect, because nothing is, but a solid and really successful system of management. And so that's what I got out of this as I was going through the article. Eric Mastel seems like a really cool guy, a really cool manager. And as I said, he definitely is kind of a melting pot of a lot of different approaches, both classical, a bit of behavioral, and then of course a lot of modern approaches that kind of take bits and pieces of each of those and kind of mesh them together. Yeah, seems like a great manager. So that's my take on Eric Mastel and his management approach.